The following contract is made between and entered into by the Helldivers Division, the Super Earth Armed Forces, hereby referred to as the Enlister, and the individual who has successfully completed their preliminary Helldiver training as set forth in Exhibit A of the Super Earth Armed Forces Recruitment and Retention Manual Part 27/B-10264. Hereby referred to as the Enlisted. The following contract is entered into willingly, and the Enlisted confirms that they have authority to enter into such an agreement at this time, being of sound mind and body, of legal age, and of citizenship grade E or above. Section 1. Services. Clause 1.1. The enlisted shall perform the services outlined in Appendix A in accordance with the operational directives identified by Super Earth High Command, the President of Super Earth, the Democratic Council of Super Earth, accredited employees of the Ministries of Super Earth, accredited representatives of the parties aforementioned in clauses 1.1.1 to 1.1.5, accredited representatives of those representatives hereby referred to as the authorized command structure. The authorized command structure may at any point with no prior notice make amendments to the schedule of services outlined in Appendix A. Copy of Appendix A may, if required, be obtained by the enlisted through contacting the relevant authorities in the SCAF Administrative Corps, with a hard copy of the appendix to be delivered to the requesting enlisted within 5 to 10 business years. Clause 1.2. The services performed by the enlisted for the enlister shall include but are not limited to active combat operations, which may include but shall not be limited to raids, deployments, invasions, sorties, forays, assaults, blitzes, incursions, onslaughts, liberations, razings, flattenings, and nukings. Non-combat operations, which may include but shall not be limited to parades, interviews, signings, and appearances, executions, both summary and otherwise, interplanetary transportation, including the escort of civilian or democratic vessels, and any activities deemed necessary in the pursuit of the aims identified by the enlister and the authorized command structure. In order to enable full and complete enactment of these services, the enlisted is hereby authorized to employ lethal force, non-lethal force, non-lethal non-force, and lethal non-force to be employed at the discretion of the enlisted. The enlisted may not subcontract in the whole or in part any of the duties requested of them by the enlister. Clause 1.3. The services shall be performed by the enlisted at locations identified by the enlister, the authorized command structure. In order to enable the completion of the services in an efficient and timely manner, the enlisted will be entrusted with the command of a Class 6 Super Destroyer Series crewed interplanetary combat vessel, hereby referred to as the Super Destroyer. Upon the termination of the contract of the enlisted, referred to Section 5 for termination, command of this Super Destroyer will be transferred to the next eligible enlisted in the order designated by the serving shipmaster, the enlister, the authorized command structure, accredited representatives of the parties listed in clauses 1.3.1 to 1.3.3. The heirs, successors, and assigns of the enlisted have no right, claim, or interest in the ownership or command of the Super Destroyer. Should the actions of the enlisted result in loss, damages, or impediments to the Super Destroyer, requiring ameliorative or restorative action, the cost of such repairs shall be subtracted from the martyrdom payment due to the heirs or successors of the enlisted, referred to Section 2, Compensation. Clause 1.4. The enlisted will be responsible for the purchasing, maintenance, replacement, and improvement of the equipment used for the provision of services. If the contract of the enlisted is terminated due to the conditions outlined in Clause 5.1, absence of pulse, the equipment purchased, maintained, replaced, and improved by the enlisted shall stay with the destroyer and shall be made available to the next Helldiver to command the vessel. Section 2. Remuneration. Clause 2.1. For the performance of the services outlined within the schedule set forth in Appendix A, the Helldiver shall receive monetary compensation for the services rendered. The compensation shall vary in line with the services performed. The enlister reserves the right to, at any time and with no prior notice, make amendments to the scheduled payments. Clause 2.2. The enlister acknowledges that the position of the enlisted, or Helldiver, is classified by the Super Earth Ministry of Employment as an exceptionally patriotic duty. Accordingly, upon commencement of the delivery of services, the immediate family members of the enlisted, defined as parents, siblings, heirs, and successors, shall receive 4.5 citizenship points to be allocated at the recipient's discretion. This compensation shall be non-transferable and may not be exchanged for a cash equivalent. Clause 2.3. In the event of the non-continuation of the alive status of the enlisted in the course of the rendition of services, a martyrdom payment shall be made to the immediate family members of the enlisted, defined as parents, siblings, heirs, and successors, minus any dispensations outlined in Section 1.3. Section 3. Confidentiality in classified materials. Clause 3.1. In the course of the rendition of services, the enlisted is likely to become exposed to information of strategic importance, including but not limited to maps, mission briefings, internal procedural documentation, details of products, prices, and seasonal discounts. The enlister and enlisted agree that any and all privileged information, collectively classified materials, viewed by the enlisted shall be maintained in the strictest secrecy by the enlisted, with all reasonable efforts made to avoid the transfer, leakage, dissemination, publication, conveyance, and/or seepage of classified materials, and shall be provided in formats which are traceable to the enlisted in the event of transfer, leakage, dissemination, publication, conveyance, and/or seepage. The enlisted agrees to return any and all data, documents, directories, manuals, maps, and notes pertaining to classified materials upon termination of this contract request by the enlister. Clause 3.2. Any information made known to the enlisted outside of operational parameters which is not considered customarily known to the general citizenry and/or which was not known to the enlisted prior to the commencement of this agreement shall, for the purposes of clarity, be considered controlled classified materials. For the access of controlled classified materials, explicit advanced written consent must be obtained by the enlisted. Clause 3.3. To read these terms and conditions in full shall be considered a breach of Clause 3.2. Section 4. Indemnification. Clause 4.1. Unless otherwise stated, the enlisted shall be solely and exclusively responsible for any and all damages, harm, liability, loss, costs, expenses, craters, atrocities, and crimes, civil, uncivil, war, caused, created, or generated during the course of the rendition of the services. The enlisted hereby indemnifies the enlister and the authorized command structure, including, but not limited to, any employees, representatives, heirs, and successors against any costs, challenges, losses, damages, or expenses without limitation arising from or relating in any way to the rendition of services by the enlisted. Clause 4.2. Any damage sustained by the enlisted, whether reputational or corporeal, including but not limited to incineration, evisceration, spinal separation, vaporization, crushing, freezing, burning, decapitation, paper cuts, explosion, contusion, removal of arms and/or limbs, addition of arms and/or limbs, dizziness, nausea, shortness of breath, and/or death, shall not be considered the responsibility of the enlister. Clause 4.3. The enlisted shall not hold the enlister in whole or in part responsible for whether they return in whole or in part. Section 5. Termination. This agreement will be governed by the laws of Super Earth and shall be terminated in the event that 1. The enlisted is mortally wounded, such that medical attention should not be physically or financially justifiable. 2. The enlisted expresses seditious, dangerous, or treacherous thoughts, opinions, actions, or sentiments. 3. By the enlister, for any reason, notice of the cause for termination is not required. The provisions of sections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 shall survive termination. Section 6. General provisions. Clause 6.1. The enlisted consents to personal information, including, but not limited to, biometric, patriotic, and demographic data, to be collected and processed by the enlister, the authorized command structure, appropriate agents of the Super Earth Armed Forces, and Democratic Council. Clause 6.2. The enlisted consents to personal samples, including, but not limited to, flesh, bone, and blood, to be collected and processed by the enlister, the authorized command structure, appropriate agents of the Super Earth Armed Forces, and Democratic Council. Clause 6.3. The enlisted provides unequivocal and irrevocable consent to the use of experimental weaponries, technologies, and narcotics. Clause 6.4. The contract shall be considered binding upon being read, in whole or in part, for the purpose of the elimination of doubt. The enlisted spending 1 second within 15 meters of a copy of the contract shall be interpreted as the contract being read.